Okay, so we are going to finish Mishnah 1 today. I'm just going to put it back up on the screen for everyone. So we didn't put it up yesterday, so get the wording. And so the Anshe Knesset said 3 things. The first one was be deliberate in judgment, establish many students, and we talked about that yesterday in terms of both quantity, quality, and the keeping for the future to make sure everyone is able to know and have the knowledge necessary. And finally, they said va'asu siag la Torah, which translated as make a protective fence for the Torah. Siag it doesn't literally, but it means here some type of a barrier, something that's going to protect the Torah. And the idea behind that is as follows. So first of all, the idea of making a fence is generally to keep someone from going past a certain barrier, right? That's what a fence does. A fence is not, you could have a few things for a fence. You could have a situation where you want to have just between me and you, we shouldn't get together. We have our blocking. That's one type of fence, but really a fence, generally the idea is not to go beyond it. And in the case of the Torah, so we have things that we're not supposed to do. We have prohibitions. And the idea of making a fence is that if you don't have a fence, it's easy to step over the line, right? If you walk right next to the line and you're not paying attention, you can easily go over the line. But if there's a fence there, then you're not going to be able to go over the line. And that's really the idea here behind this idea that it's sort of also like a moat, right? That you can't go past it. And the idea is to ensure that a person does not transgress a Torah law. Now, the sages instituted many laws. We know that. But this commandment is on 2 levels. One is, yes, the sages are supposed to institute, they were given the authority by the Torah, by the way. The Torah said that the sages have that authority. And Torah said a statement which applies to everyone, which is ushmartem es mishmarti, that you should protect my observances. That not just that the sages were given the authority and the command to make that happen, but every single individual has that. So they'll take it from 2 perspectives. Number one, the sages. So the sages, we know, have made many rabbinic laws, most of which are designed to protect the Torah law. And in a certain way, all of them are designed to protect the Torah way of life, but some are prohibitions. Some are not actually prohibitions. Some are the sages instituted laws to enable society to work better. But the prohibitions, classic prohibitions, certainly would apply on Shabbos and in Kashrut. Those are places where you see it most obvious. Things such as meat and milk, for example, where the Torah law is that you're not allowed to cook meat and milk together. You're not allowed to eat something which was meat and milk that was cooked together. However, the Torah law does not say you can't have a piece of meat over here, a piece of milk over there, and have them right after each other. The Torah doesn't say that. That's the rabbinic law coming in to protect the Torah law. So many of the things that we do, especially with the idea of meat and milk, is rabbinic prohibitions designed to make sure that we don't come to it. Because we know that even with all those prohibitions, still mistakes happen, especially when you have a small kitchen. So that's why they put those prohibitions in place. The Torah itself, by the way, has a few examples where the Torah itself made a protection against its own law. So one of the classic examples is the Nazir, the person who made a vow that he wasn't going to drink wine, could be a she, or cut their hair, etc. They're called a Nazir, live a certain life, not become tameh. That the Torah made a prohibition that the person can't even have any grape or grape products. That's not wine. But because Torah wants to make sure that they don't come in to end up drinking wine by accident or by temptation or whatever it is, Torah says, oh, stay away from the grape totally, and that way you won't come to drink wine. And that's the idea behind making a fence. This idea, though, is not limited to enactments that the sages put in place, which, as far as we're concerned, once the sages made it into law, it's law, even though we do know, we're supposed to know the difference between a rabbinic law and a Torah law, and there may be certain situations, especially where emergencies come up, where you might have to transgress a law, in which case transgress a rabbinic law rather than a Torah law. And so it is important to know the difference. But on a general, practical, day-to-day level, we're going to observe a rabbinic law just as much as we're going to observe a Torah law. And sometimes we are told to be even more careful with rabbinic law because we don't want to step on it and devalue it. However, on our own selves, even things where there is no prohibition on, this is telling us we should make our own fences. In other words, there are certain things where you can get yourself into trouble. You could end up doing something that you shouldn't because you're in a place or in a situation which, in a sense, we'll call it asking for trouble. Therefore, stay away from those type of places. Stay away from that situation. Don't have that item that's going to cause you a problem. You can make your own fences as well. And this law, this statement by the Anshe Knesset Gadol is telling us that's what we should do. We should be making our own fences so that we ourselves don't end up becoming in a situation where we know that we will be tempted to do something we should not do. Because the sages understood that when it comes to sin, when it comes to doing certain things, temptation is great. And sometimes we can't help ourselves. So the way to help yourself is to block yourself from ever getting into the situation in the first place. A simple maybe example is Lashon Hara, right? Which is so easy to say things about people, negative things about people. So avoid the conversation in the first place, right? If you know there's a group of people who always gossip, you know what? Try to avoid getting into conversation with those people, because you're going to, and once you sit down at the table with them, you're going to end up talking about something you shouldn't, right? So sit at a different table. Things like that are things that we can do, and we are being told that's what we should do. The Seforno, interestingly, has a very different take, and he looks at it as giving a power to the courts, that the courts should be making sure that if a person does something wrong, they get punished. And so you have the law, obviously there are consequences for people who do things wrong, and the law not only should enforce it, but even in certain situations, the courts are given the authority to enact consequences that were not necessarily mandated by the Torah. In other words, they're given, and we'll call it like martial law type of thing, where they're given extra powers when they see that there's a problem in society. Then they have the ability to give punishments and give consequences that were not the actual official ones. But they have that authority. And again, the idea is to create this fence around the Torah to protect it, because they realize that if people are doing these things, then there's going to be a problem in society. So that he understands it in that manner. And in general, I say the idea of the fence is that the protection of the Torah law, that's the goal. And if we are going to be appreciating the importance of not transgressing the Torah law, then we will want to make sure that we have that fence around us. We're not going to resent it. We're going to actually welcome it, because our goal is to make sure that we are staying within the boundaries of Torah law. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay. Thank you.